Good morning. Good morning. This is Biniam. Welcome back to the Checkin In podcast. Happy Monday to you all. Hope you had a great weekend. Today is episode number 52. The date is September the 13th. September the 13th, 2021. And we are back again for another week filled with thought-provoking questions as we reflect and consider how we are going to grow personally. Good morning, all my friends coming on. I so appreciate you guys being here. My name again is Biniam. This is the Checkin In podcast, episode number 52. There are three key reasons why we do this podcast. The overarching reason is because I like working on me. I like becoming a better version of me. And I want to invite you guys into this process with me together. So the three key reasons that we want to do this podcast and focus our attention on are: number one, awareness of who we are, how we're made up, what we value, how we are evolving as individuals. Awareness is such a really important starting point. These three things are sequentially placed in a very specific way, and that's how I've experienced my growth, and so how I want to share my experience with you. So that starts off with awareness. Number two, kindness. Kindness, what does that look like? Not specifically kindness towards others, although that's one of the brands that I'm known for, and even my self-appointed title as a kindologist is what I go by. But what does kindness look like first and foremost? Before giving it to others, what does kindness look like as you show it to yourself? And then thirdly, happiness. You know, happiness is one of those things I've observed in this cultural context for many years now that people really value. They want to strive to become more happy. They want to seek after it. And it always seems so elusive, right? It seems so elusive, like just beyond your grasp. And yet people invest a lot of resources to try and get to that end. What does it look like to actually experience happiness, the kind that fills your soul? So these are the three things that I like to focus on the Checkin In podcast. Welcome again to episode 52. Glad to have you with me for the next few minutes as we reflect and chat and share experiences and thoughts and observations. I have not even mentioned today's question of the day. Basically, what I do is there is a question of the day that I love focusing on, a self-reflective question. Why? Because this is how I grow more aware of me, how I grow aware of how I'm thinking, how I'm valuing, how I am morphing over time, and how I can do that intentionally. That's one of my big things. And so I ask self-reflective questions to know more about me. And in the process of knowing more about me, I'm able to see the span of shifts and changes over time, how I'm evolving as an individual, and evolving sometimes in a way by way of reflecting and saying, how do I move from where I'm presently at and acknowledge where that is? That's the awareness piece. And the kindness is applied by saying, how can I give myself permission to shift and change in a way that is reflective of what I value and what I hold dear. And that's really important too. It's how are we able to move in a direction that reflects and synchronizes really well with what we are aiming to experience in this life. So that's really important for me. And of course, in the process of doing this, I experience massive happiness. Massive happiness comes, I think, when we're becoming more aware of ourselves, treating ourselves with kindness in the process of that change. And then the happiness comes not because someone outside validates us, but because we validate ourselves. We are in a place of saying, hey, wherever I am right now, I'm really pleased with where I'm at, even as I continue to grow as an individual. How can we celebrate those shifts and changes over time? That is worthwhile, I think. So here is the question of the day today. The question is, and I like this question, what makes you feel optimistic about the future? What makes you feel optimistic about the future? I'm thrilled about this question because I have some ideas. I've got some distinct ideas because I've given this definitely some thought over time, and I have some suggestions of what makes me feel tremendously optimistic as I go into the future. Now, I often call myself an optimistic realist or a realistic optimist, whichever flavor you so desire. And that is because, number one, I like being realistic first and foremost about the way things actually are. How are things presently? Sorry, I should ask, where are things presently at? That's the realistic component. But even as we consider where they're presently at, how can we continue to look for a brighter forecast in the future? That's what I'm really into, and that's what I want to experience more of. In fact, that's the whole premise for why I have the sequence of the three pillars the way I do. Number one is the awareness piece. Awareness piece, as I lead you through that and as I model what that looks like, a significant part of that for me looks like, what does it look like for me to be aware of what's going on here, but to also acknowledge it and accept that this is my starting place? How can I move forward in such a way where I say, here's my starting premise right here, here's my starting block, and how can I be okay with where I'm currently at? Because this is a really good place today and this moment to want to acknowledge what that looks like and where we're going to go from there. Where we're going to go from there by way of shifting and growing as individuals into our future. That is somewhat a real non negotiable for me in my experience. So, as I think about where I'm presently at, I want to acknowledge that and say, here's my starting place today. Now, how can I go to the next level? How can I incrementally work my way into where I believe I was made to be, into what I really value? I want to affirm you guys this way too, because so many of us, we beat ourselves down from the very get go. We beat ourselves down from the very get go in this experience because we say things like, I'm not valid or worthwhile being loved. I'm not lovable. I'm not someone who should be taking this space that I'm currently taking. I know I interact with many people along the way who have a really negative view of themselves. And so, in that negative view, they say, I don't want to waste someone else's time by asking for their attention, by asking for their investment in me, because I don't think I am worthwhile that investment. And so I want to push back against that narrative and say, no, hell no. I don't sign up for that. I don't subscribe to that. And I want to model what that looks like for you to first and foremost be okay with where you're at today. So, my dear listener, are you in that place today where you are? Hey, how are you, my friend? Good to see you. I got your message, by the way, Brandon, and I am looking forward to that. I'm going to send you a message today and we'll connect. This is a dear friend of mine who I've met recently in one of my Uber rides. Glad to have you here, my friend. But here's what I'm wanting to say, my dear listener, as you're listening. The question we're asking is, what makes you feel optimistic about the future? But before we even get to that, what the future looks like, can I have you address your current place right now, where you're presently at? In this moment today, can I affirm that you are worthwhile? Your existence really matters today. The very way that you're made up is legitimate, if I can say it that way. I am glad that you exist today. I'm glad that you are able to experience what this moment here is for you to own your existence. I am so thrilled for this opportunity for you to be able to look at yourself and say, hey, I am not a write-off. I am not someone who's a waste of anybody's time. And for you to be able to see yourself, not me affirming you. I want to affirm you, but I want you to see first and foremost that you are totally worthwhile where you're sitting right now, where from wherever you're listening right now, that you are really okay as you are. Does that make sense? Happy New Year, my dear Ethiopian friends. By all means, Happy New Year. And I'm streaming right now on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. And of course, Spotify is recording it as well too. So that's the starting place, is that wherever you're at right now, this is a great place for you to acknowledge. You're not made to be perfect. You're not made to have all the answers right off the bat. You're not made to be presenting this flawlessness, this flawless facade of what you think you should be to the world. No, 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 no. The very fact that you're a human means that you and I are messy. Let's own our messiness and revel in it, because with each expression of messiness is an opportunity for us to grow into something more. And that's where I kind of see the silver lining of the optimism. It starts off with us acknowledging where we're currently at. Does that make sense? What does it look like for us to acknowledge where we're presently at and say, hey, I'm worthwhile. And in this moment, the messiness that is me, that's reflected in me, maybe you're wrestling with some experiences that you've had along the way. Maybe you're wrestling with some elements where you're like, oh man, I'm not sure if what I am what I've gone through last night or this past weekend or what someone else said to me reflects really well on how I want to feel as a person. Sometimes we're so bound sometimes by the way others think about us. We're so bound by the assessment we should have of ourselves. We're like, I should be over here, but I'm way back here. And that's a really good way to write ourselves off. And I want to speak against that narrative. I want to discourage that kind of forecast in the way you perceive yourself. When we start thinking in terms of, hey, here's what I'm supposed to look like, and then we start saying, if I don't look like this, if I don't fulfill these expectations that either set for myself, but the culture sets for me, or others set for me, I'm a write off. I'm one who is lacking in worth. I disagree with that. Does that make sense? I want you guys to be able to see yourself today in this moment as someone who is worthwhile. You may be having so many challenges from your past experiences. Let's say even this past weekend, maybe you were at a get together with friends and you're feeling really terrible about the way that you were able to, let's say you're feeling terrible about the way that someone spoke to you or the way that you felt after someone sort of snubbed you. That does not define who you are. So I'm spending so much time on this because as I answer to today's question, which is what makes you feel optimistic about your future, it really starts off with you understanding where you presently are. I want you to see an optimistic, bright future because where you're presently at is just the starting point today of what could be better. And what could be better starts off with an intentional application, commitment to honing in on who you are and how you're going to get to that next level. So let's start off with acceptance of ourselves today. As you're seeing yourself in the mirror today, as you're listening to this podcast, is there a way that you can see your messiness and say, I'm legitimate today? I'm worthwhile. It needs to start from yourself, my dear friend. Are you listening carefully? If it doesn't start from you, if you're looking externally for someone else's assessment of you, you're always going to be bound by external source of acceptance. But if you start it within yourself saying, I'm going to give myself permission today to be able to say, I'm worthwhile. I'm someone who is important. I like that movie, The Help. I referenced this a few episodes back, but that um, uh, they help this black woman who's helping this white family. She's looking after one of the girls there. And this girl, struggles in some significant ways. She's a small 3, 4-year-old girl, but the way she says it is beautiful. She says to this girl, she says, you is smart, you is kind, you is important. And she says these 3 affirmations over and over to this girl. She's trying to beef this girl's sense of self-worth. She's trying to help this girl understand that when she's not there to encourage her, that girl needs to look within to be able to find that encouragement. And I wanted to see you guys experience that for yourself, because when you start accepting yourself for who you are, despite the challenges that you're going through, despite the messiness that life throws at you, when you start looking at yourself from that vantage point and saying, I'm worthwhile today, your future and the ability to see your optimistic future becomes a lot more plausible, a lot more believable. But in the absence of you seeing yourself as worthwhile, it's a really difficult goal. Do you know what I'm saying? It's really difficult to access that place within yourself that says, hey, here's how I'm able to even see something bright for my future. But now let me again reaffirm just that first starting point. It really starts off with you seeing yourself and saying, hey, I'm worthwhile. Despite what others say, despite how I'm tempted to feel about how terrible I look or how lacking in worth I am worth. That's a really important starting place, because when you do so, you're able to move to the next place and saying, now that I'm able to accept myself here, both for my strengths and for my challenges, how can I move to the next place? How can I acknowledge the beautiful things that have happened in me? Listen, where you're presently at today, do you know how you actually got to this place? You have defied so many odds in getting to this place already. You've gone through so many challenges already. You have been formed by these past challenges. And often we don't give ourselves credit for how we've evolved to where we're presently at. That is such a critical component. As we look towards the future, if we don't reflect on where we've been and how we've accomplished some amazing things, and all of us have, if we're sitting down here, we've gone through some challenges. Life has not been easy to us. None of us, I dare say, have been born into this world without any challenges. Every single one of us listening here to this conversation, every single one of us has had to endure some challenges along the way that have been really deep, that have really affected us in a challenging way. And so, can we just take a moment and reflect on those significant things that have happened that have made us who we are today? And can we give ourselves a pat on the back because of where we've come? That is an amazing thing to celebrate. Because as we reflect on what's happened before and how we've worked our way to this present moment, we're the stronger for it. We're the stronger for it because we've been there and now we're here and we're still striving forward. We're still working hard. We're still waking up every day. We're still defying the odds. We're still having that energy to still strive forward. Now, some of us may have a little bit more scars along the way. Some of us may be a bit more battle weary. Some of us may be a little more discouraged along the way. But that's why we are part of conversations like this. That's why we listen to conversations like this that will enable us to have a little bit of oomph in our step. There's nothing there's nothing wrong with being inspired or encouraged by someone coming along the way and saying, "Hey, can I believe for you when you don't believe for yourself? Can I see the beautiful things in you when no one else sees those beautiful things? Can I invest in you when you see that there's nothing left to invest? Can I be optimistic for you?" And hence, now we come to answer a question. What makes you optimistic about the future? I think what makes me optimistic about the future is all that I've said so far. One, it's number one, taking where we're presently at, reflecting on where we've come from in the past, all those challenges, reflecting on the past, seeing where we're currently at, and seeing that changes happen up to this point that makes you you and where you're presently at. And when we're able to acknowledge that, it enables us now to be able to look to the future with some hope for promise. Hope for promise because the consistency so far is that you exist in this point in time, having overcome some significant challenges from the past that has made you who you are. And what are you today? You're a fighter today. You are someone who has beaten the odds. You're someone who is really strong in their power to reflect on your past experiences and your past stories in such a way that now, as you're going forward, you're like, hey, I think I still have something left in the tank here to keep on going in this next round. And that is what gives me tremendous optimism about the future. My optimism for the future is really driven because of where I've come from and how I have learned my way to this present moment to say I've learned so much that is going to now help me go to the future. For some of you, you may have been disillusioned. You may have been cynical about life in general. You may have experienced some really bad things at the hands of others. Maybe you've heard promises from others that you looked up to and they have fallen short on those promises. And so now you're like, I'm not sure I want to experience this. For others of you, you might have just seen a lot of crap in your own context. Maybe you're in that kind of a career where you see a lot of crap coming in and seeing it over and over. You haven't been able to look after yourself very well. You haven't been able to do the self care that enables you to move on to that next level of saying, how can I care for my heart? How can I care for my mind? How can I enable myself to move forward while still believing that there can be good because you've seen so much bad. I'm thinking of those who are working as emergency personnel, driving ambulances or police officers or those in the law who see a lot of crappiness. For others of you, you might have actually experienced loss of someone who is really special and important to you. And that might have just sucked away all that optimism where you're like, I don't see anything worth living. Maybe it's a partner that you really grew to love and now they've been taken away from you in some devastating way. And you're still feeling the loss. I've met individuals like this who are just so depressed and so discouraged because of someone that they've lost that way. That really meant a lot. And so, what does that look like for us now as we're going forward to be able to acknowledge and say, hey, it's okay to have these feelings, but don't forget that there's an accounting that needs to be happening, a recalibration. Life does throw pessimistic circumstances. In fact, the one guarantee I think that I've experienced and that I could probably speak into your experience as well is that life is going to be a challenge more so than not. There are so many things that are going to come along the way that are going to like shake us at the core, that are going to challenge us and saying, holy crap, is this really still worthwhile going through? Whether it's economic, whether it's relational, whether it's spiritual, whether it's like all these ways that we can experience of where challenge can come from. Maybe it's that we're trying to like econ an existence economically, and we're just not sure where the money's going to come from for rent. Maybe it is our place in our social circles. We just don't feel like we have anyone who actually understands and knows us the way we'd love to have someone know us. Maybe there's just that lack of intimacy and closeness that you desire in someone else that isn't there. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's something along the lines of your body's racked by physical challenges and you are just trying to like make it through another day through all the pain. See, there are so many things that life is going to throw that will shake us in a way that we're not sure that we can hang on. How do we find the optimism in the future, which we're all heading towards? I think it really happens when we first of all reflect on where we've come from already. What are some of those stories that we may have forgotten of how life has been challenging? What are some of those experiences that we've experienced once upon a time of challenge that we have been able to work our way through and come out on the other side? Look at those as starting places and derive encouragement from them. That's no small feat that does happen when you were able to move through those experiences. But as you're going through them and as you're coming out on the other side, what does it look like for you to not only acknowledge them, but also remember them? Memory is a powerful thing, my dear listener. Memory is a powerful thing. When you remember, it takes you back to once upon a time, what once was, and enables you to relive it. And as you're reliving those experiences of overcoming those challenges, this memory serves you to say, hey, I do have something to bring to the table based on my experiences that I've learned through and overcoming those challenges. And as you're reflecting on those through your memory, where you're presently at, saying, I do have something worthwhile because I am the stronger for going through those past experiences. And now as I look to the future, the consistency in the past that I'm banking on is that I've made it through these challenges. I can continue to make it. You're a work that is amazing, that is something worthwhile being reflected on. Do you know one of the things I love most as I drive my Uber? As I drive my Uber and as I get an opportunity to interact with various kinds of people, do you know what really makes it worth my while? It is when I get to talk to these individuals, when I get to listen actively, when I get to ask insightful questions, when I get to connect with their hearts and say, from the moment you got in to the moment that we're finishing our ride now, this is worthwhile for me. This is worthwhile in a sense whereby I'm able now to understand you a lot better. I'm able to see your story a lot more. And I'm inspired by the forecast that you're on, just because I can see the trajectory from where you've come from. I find my future optimistic because I've come to learn one key thing, that as a messy human being, that's my core identity. For me, it is to be human is to be messy. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay to express that. I'm okay to accommodate others' messiness as well as fellow human beings. I want to make space for that. As messy human beings, we have the ability to grow to be better. I know what it's like for me once upon a time to have contributed to other people's disillusionment, cynicism, discouragements, hurt, sadness. There's so many things that have contributed that I never wanted to, and yet I did. And now I'm in this zone where I want to invest hope in others. I want to invest hope in a tangible way. In fact, I was doing some brainstorming over the week, and here is sort of the premise of what I want to do. I want to amplify awareness. I want to amplify my awareness and yours of ourselves. I want to extend kindness to myself, just as like I want you to extend kindness to yourself before you receive it from others. And then I also want you to boost that experience of happiness. These are some core things that I want to invest myself in. Let me just catch up with some of the comments here. Your words and encouragement are so down to earth and easy to understand. I'm so glad you feel that way. Sometimes your voice is too low to hear. Else keep up. What is your worst experience on driving Uber? It's when I don't get a chance to connect with people in the way that I value. That's probably the sad part is when someone gets in and they're just giving clear signals that they don't want to connect at all in any way. I'm like, I'm going to honor and respect that, but it's a wonderful opportunity that we're missing here. But I'm going to honor it. I'm not going to press myself on them. So that's probably one of the sad ones. But my worst one would probably be, yes, I am from Calgary, Land. My worst experience is probably just two experiences I remember, and that's where the interaction was one that didn't reflect an optimistic forecast for those individuals in that moment, and that was they're intoxicated, they were in a really bad headspace, and the way they were expressing their frustration was verbal abuse, basically. And so I know my new lines or boundaries that I draw, whereby I'm not going to be on the receiving end of that, because first and foremost, as I treat myself kindly, I don't want to stay in that zone, so I'm going to communicate those boundaries to others. So what makes you feel optimistic about the future? What makes me feel optimistic about the future, dear friends, is that I am in a place where I can continue to grow to be a better version of myself. I've been seeing that over my lifetime, and it's more significantly these last few years. That gives me great hope. That gives me great hope that I can see myself honestly. I can be aware of who I am, know where my starting place is, know where my amazing components of my characteristics are, and acknowledge what those are, but also account for those areas that I struggle with. And not beat myself up for that, but treat myself kind of saying, I would like to become a more patient person. Now I'm going to look at this starting points in this moment that I'm considering this. And what does that look like for me now to be able to move to that next zone of saying, how can I be kind to myself in this process of change? How can I become more gracious as I extend patience in whatever it is I'm striving for, whether it's patience, whether it's kindness, whether it's um, um, hope, like all these beautiful things that we want to experience. How can I be kind to myself? And that's where the optimism comes. And I think that experience for me is one that I have for every one of you. That's why I want to do this series on the Been Checking In podcast. I like checking in with you guys. I like checking in on myself as I share that experience with you guys. The Been Checking In podcast is, again, my way of being intentional about how I grow as an individual, how I'm moving through this life in a way that enables me to be happy about the aftertaste. What part of YYC you round most in trying to get you as a driver? Oh, thank you, Leland. Honestly, that's a difficult question to ask because I'm all over the city and outside the city as well. I'll pick up someone in one spot and I'll end up in a different part of the city, and I'm all over the place. So I don't even know where my travels take me. So it's almost like by chance that will get to me. But I hope we have the pleasure, my dear friend. That would be amazing to connect with you. My dear friends, I'm hoping this has been something encouraging. I love the encouraging element of this question. What makes you feel optimistic about your future? I'd love to hear your responses in the comments. By all means, feel free to leave those for me. But for me, what makes me feel optimistic about my future is that we as human beings can move from one zone where we're presently at in this moment to something that's better. And I love striving my way forward towards what that could look like. That's what I'm investing myself in. And that's what I want to share with you guys as well, too. I want to experience your good that way. I want to see your growth. I want to see your hell yes as you experience that progression of where you presently are and how you're progressing forward. I want to hear those stories about how you look back and say, here was a defining point for me, and here's how I've moved forward in that experience. I think this is worthwhile experiencing, and that's what I'm investing myself intentionally in, and whence I'm also inviting you guys to join me in this process. This has been so meaningful for me to reflect on this. Especially because this is the thing that gives me juice to keep going forward. This is the thing that continues to increase my optimism about heading into an unknown future. There are so many things in life right now that are sort of shaking us by way of our certainty. There are so many things that seem to threaten our forecast as human beings in bringing our morale down. But the thing that keeps me going forward through the midst of all these challenges that we're collectively experiencing and individually experiencing is that it's not game over. It's not game over. There's still something more bright in the future. And that brightness can actually start from within us. That can start within us when we first and foremost become aware of who we are. If we can shine a spotlight inside of us and say, how can I get to know me for who I truly am? A lot of people, that's a scary proposition, but I want to affirm that you are worthwhile there. Okay, you're worthwhile where you're presently at. And as you consider how you're going to change in that process, how you're going to affirm yourself with the good parts and work on the tough parts, how you can be kind to yourself, we make more room for our happiness. That's what I'm aiming for. I'm a happiness glutton, and I want to share that happiness with you. I want to share that hope with you. So is there some way I can partner with you to help you see your amazingness? Is there some way that I can invest in you to say, hey, you are not game over yet. In fact, you have a whole life in front of you that could be really spectacular. What are those present challenges that you are navigating? I may not be able to relate with them. The brightest star starts within Vinium. Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you, Vince, my friend. But how can I inspire you from where you're presently at and say, can I hold your hand? Can we walk forward together? There's no shame in walking forward together. There's no shame in being able to say, I need some help along the way. No shame at all. I need help. You need help. Can we together grow in our trajectories? And can we together speak into each other's optimistic forecasts? That is so worthwhile. My dear friends, this has been episode number 52 of the Ben Checkin In podcast. I'll be back again tomorrow. I hope to see you then. Drop me a line. Send me a message. I would love to hear from you. Much love to you all. Bye for now.